Welcome to Root and Rewire, a grounded, mystical space for awakening, remembering, and becoming. I'm Kayla, and here we explore the shifts, the stories, and the synchronicities that reshape us from the inside out, along with the mystical, the unseen, and the magic that's woven into everyday life. Take a deep breath, soften into yourself, and let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Root and Rewire podcast. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm happy to be here. And today's episode is one that I feel really deeply about. And I have a feeling, and I hope that a lot of you feel very seen while hearing this episode today, because we're talking about the cycles that we tend to repeat in love. And there are many cycles, many. However, I wanted to do a deep dive and figure out what are the top 8 cycles that most people tend to fall into and therefore find themselves in their romantic relationships and their intimate relationships, their community and their family. And if you've ever noticed that your relationship looks different, but somehow feels the same, then this is a cycle. It is a different partner, but same emotional ending, a different face, but same confusion, same anxiety, same questions. And if you ever have looked to connect your relationships before, you've probably asked yourself why this keeps happening. Why do I keep attracting the same dynamics? Why do I keep ending up in relationships that feel so similar? And I feel it's important to share that most of us find ourselves in repeating cycles. And if you do any inner work on yourself, if you really take the time to see yourself on a deeper level, really connect with yourself, outside of your relationships, after your relationships, then you may find that any relationship that you tend to attract afterward is better than the one before. However, it is still very common to have 1 to 3, maybe even more cycles that you tend to repeat. We don't attract the same people, but we do repeat the same patterns. And these patterns don't exist because something is wrong with us. They exist because our nervous system is working to keep us safe. And so we're going to walk through the 8 most common that people tend to repeat, and we're going to try to talk to how to begin breaking these patterns. But before we talk about the cycles themselves, we should look into understanding why these cycles exist. We repeat relationship patterns because they are familiar, they are nervous system safe, they are based on earlier emotional experiences, they are learned through attachment, and they are often unfinished emotional loss ends. Our nervous system has one main job, and that is to keep us safe. And the tricky part is that your nervous system chooses familiar over healthy until it learns that healthy is safe. So even if a dynamic hurts you, if it feels familiar, your nervous system recognizes it as home. And that's how cycles tend to repeat. There's another layer that's really important to dive into. We don't just repeat patterns because they're familiar. We also repeat patterns because of the core beliefs that we hold about love, about ourselves, and relationships in general. Under every relationship pattern is a subconscious belief that our nervous system has accepted as truth. Under every relationship pattern is a subconscious belief that your nervous system has accepted as truth. And we unconsciously look for evidence that those beliefs are true. So we end up choosing patterns, partners, and dynamics that confirm these beliefs. And it's not because we want to suffer, but it is because the brain loves being right, even when being right hurts. If you believe that love must be earned, you will feel drawn to relationship where love must actually be earned. If you believe people leave, you will feel drawn to emotionally unavailable partners. If you believe your needs are a burden, you will choose partners who struggle to meet them. We don't attract randomly. We attract confirmation. And that means that we can change these beliefs. I found myself in a little bit of a relationship series that we're creating. I was really wanting to create an episode on the 4 pillars of compatibility in relationships. But after last week's episode, I feel like this was the next step in understanding what we're trying to get to and why we may be stuck where we are. So this episode on the 8 relationship cycles are for us to really look at ourselves and look at our relationships that we have in our lives to see what may be repeating, if any. And once we can begin to work on this cycle, break the cycle, then we can look to bringing in that 4 out of 4, bringing in that deeply connective, beautiful relationship. But first, let's dive into these 8 relationship cycles. So the first cycle is the fixer and the healer cycle. This is the cycle of being attracted to people who are struggling, who are wounded, or not quite ready. You may feel drawn to partners who have trauma that they haven't worked through, are in chaotic life seasons, are emotionally unavailable but trying. You may feel drawn to partners who need support, who need encouragement, or need saving. At first, this does feel meaningful. It feels deep. It feels purposeful. You feel important. You feel needed. You feel valuable. But over time, the relationship tends to become more one-sided. You give, and eventually you feel exhausted, you feel unseen, and emotionally depleted. Underneath this cycle is a belief that could be framed like, I earn love by being useful. And a way to start breaking this pattern, breaking this cycle, is to practice receiving love that doesn't require you to rescue anyone. The second cycle is the emotional caretaker cycle. This cycle is quieter and it's more subtle. In the cycle, you feel responsible for your partner's emotional world. You may find yourself monitoring their moods, anticipating their reactions, softening your words, avoiding conflict, walking on eggshells. Their emotions become your responsibility. And this means that you may have learned early on that emotional stability depended on reading the room. But in adult relationships, this becomes emotional overfunctioning. You are doing emotional labor, not just for yourself, but for somebody else. And the way to begin to break this cycle is to allow people to have their own emotional experiences without feeling like you need to take care of it. An example of this is if you have someone who has had a really hard day, instead of holding their emotions for them, right? Deep diving into this conversation, giving them tips about how to make their next day better or, how to go into the next, bad day, the type of mind to have. Instead, you just hold the space. Maybe you respond with, "That sucks. I am so sorry that you had a really bad day. I'm here to listen and I love you." Right? So I'm not putting myself in overdrive to care for their emotion. Instead, I'm holding space for myself and this person that I love by just listening. The third cycle is losing yourself in love. This is the merging cycle. When you enter a relationship, your life slowly reorganizes itself around it. Your routines shift, your hobbies fade, your independence softens, and your world becomes the relationship. At first, this feels romantic and it feels intimate, but eventually you wake up and wonder where you went. And underneath this is a belief that sounds something like connection requires merging. And in order to break this cycle, it's important to practice staying yourself while loving somebody else. So this really requires you to put yourself first. Instead of seeing them 4 nights a week, maybe you see them for 2 nights a week, you take time for yourself doing things that you love. Maybe there's a week where you don't see them at all, and you just prioritize being with your friends. Right? And this isn't actively pushing the other person away. It is making sure that you're staying yourself, holding yourself, loving yourself, and doing the things that you love before this other person and the relationship as a whole. Okay. The fourth cycle is the emotionally unavailable partner cycle. In this cycle, you crave closeness, but you choose people who struggle to give it. You feel that you must earn intimacy. You feel addicted to the highs and devastated by the lows. Longing feels like love. And your nervous system mistakes inconsistency for attraction. I feel like many people find themselves in this cycle. I think this is a very common cycle. And in order to break this cycle, a way to begin is to learn to feel safe in consistency and reliability. and not taking anything less than. The fifth cycle is the almost relationship cycle. This is situationships. This is undefined connections. This is potential without the commitment. In this cycle, you connect very deeply, but something always keeps it from becoming real. The fantasy of this feels safer than true intimacy. And in order to break this cycle, you need to begin to choose reciprocity over the potential. The sixth cycle is the chemistry over compatibility cycle. In this one, there is a strong spark, there is fast intensity, there is emotional chaos that comes later. Butterflies can sometimes be the nervous system activation, but it is not the compatibility. And next week, we'll talk about what true compatibility can actually look like. A way to tell if it's your nervous system or if it actually is you and the other person being a compatible couple. But in order to break this chemistry over compatibility cycle, it's important to slow down the attraction and let the compatibility reveal itself over time. What is important to you in relationships? What do you feel like you deserve from a partner? These are the things that you need to look to, right? Not just the attraction, not just the fire, not just the passion, but how do you guys communicate? How does this other person communicate to you? How do they make your nervous system feel? Do you feel calm or do you feel activated? Do you feel calm or do you feel triggered? Okay. The seventh cycle is the proving your worth cycle. In this cycle, you're auditioning for love. You are overgiving, showing up more than you should. You're overperforming. You try to be good enough. And under this is a belief that may sound like, I must earn love. And the way to break this cycle is to stop the audition. Allow yourself to be and show up in the way that feels safe to you and your body. And seeing how the other person revolves around that, how they dance around that, how they show up. Okay. The eighth cycle is the fear of being fully seen cycle. In this one, you crave intimacy, but you pull away when it deepens. You find yourself self-sabotaging when the connection becomes real. Because being fully seen once felt unsafe. So you pick and choose how and when they get to see you, what they get to see you as. In this cycle, the way to begin breaking it is to practice vulnerability in really small, safe steps. Now, I know we hear these cycles, right? And we have the beginner step. It is a lot harder to actually break these cycles because once you recognize it, you then have to begin to prove to your nervous system, begin to prove to yourself what the new belief is. But really important to acknowledge that it was there to protect you from one time or another. It was there for a reason. It was there for love, right? But we no longer need that belief to protect us. And we can change it, but it takes small steps of recognition. And I believe when it comes to breaking a cycle, breaking a pattern, there can always be steps to follow, right, to break it. And we all want to know how long it's going to take and how to maneuver. But I think this is where the intuition comes in. This is where sitting with yourself becomes really important, because your steps to breaking it may be different than somebody else's steps to break it. The length of time required to break it may be longer or shorter than somebody else's. So when it comes to breaking relationship cycles, breaking any cycles, creating new core beliefs, really sit with yourself, because you know the answers already. And there's nothing that your higher self wants more for you than to break it. So your higher self will give you the steps that you need. But it's important not to overthink it. Whatever comes through, if it's not activation, if it feels calm, take that step. And it really requires us to catch ourselves in the moment, which is also really hard. Because our emotions want to take over. Our nervous system wants to get back to baseline. So the activation can feel really strong. But the more you begin to practice slowing yourself down in every other way of life, the easier it becomes to slow yourself down in the moment. And it's different working on breaking the cycles when you're already in an intimate relationship or other relationships. But you don't need to be in a relationship to break a cycle. You can do this while you're single. And it's going to look different. If you have a partner, it's really just describing to them what you need from them in the moment, right? It's really using their reaction to gauge for yourself. Okay, this would normally activate me for this reason, but now I'm going to move this way, right? You have that person to bounce off of. However, when you're single, you can start by noticing your own attraction patterns, by building an identity and self-trust on your own, by strengthening your boundaries in every other aspect of life, with your friends, within work, with your family, and working to create that nervous system safety on your own. And this can come through any other area of life. But you're putting the focus in that area to help you break your relationship cycle. Everything is connected. You don't need to only work through a relationship cycle to break a relationship cycle. You can break a relationship cycle through any other aspect of life. You can use your friends, your community, you can use your job, you can use your financials. The work isn't finding better people, right? When we are entering in, or we are in a cycle with a current partner, it's really important not to place the blame. We already had an episode, we are not a victim. We play a role here. And you can shift already existing relationships. You don't need to leave it. But the work is becoming someone who chooses differently. This is where the work begins. It's not removing someone from your life, trying again. It's seeing what that person is reflecting to you and changing the tune. Really curious to know if any of you recognize yourself in any of the cycles mentioned today. It's probably a million cycles. But I wanted to know, what are the most popular ones? What are the ones most people tend to repeat? This is about becoming aware. This is what the podcast is about. It's rooting and rewiring. Awareness is where the cycles begin to break. If you feel called to, I would love for you to journal and reflect on which cycle or cycles felt the most familiar. Out of these cycles, there were 3 cycles that my intuition and my higher self told me I am still repeating. Once you have the cycle down, sit with yourself and begin to understand what steps can be taken to rewire the beliefs that you're already holding around relationships. Next week, we will talk about compatibility in relationships and what compatibility looks like for me. I break it down into 4 core pillars, but we'll touch on that later. If you feel called to, please leave a comment. Feel free to reach out to me. Would love to chat about this more. But I hope you found something that resonated. And I really look forward to seeing you in the very next episode. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support. And I'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much for your support and tuning in today. If this episode supported you and you would like to share, or if you're just looking for someone to connect with, you can find me on Instagram at Soil and Soul Sister. I hope to hear from you. I would love to hear from you. And until next time.